This episode contains rude words.
Hello, lovely humans. This week I am chatting to Amy Sloan from My Nonna Life on Instagram. She is a pro at all things preserving. So I chew her ear off about not just her gardening, but also all her preserving. And she kind of gives me lots of tips. This is something I really want to delve into once we get our house sorted. So all things preserving, if you want to know more, definitely listen in. She's based in WA. So anybody who wants to do workshops, she actually does them live. I'm considering whether a flight is worth it. Maybe I'll just get her to come over here. And while I have your attention, I just wanted to chat to you quickly about Elle from Australian Medicinal Herbs. So she's sponsoring the podcast this season. And the thing I want to chat to you about in particular is passion flower. I found this to be really helpful. Now the kids are back at school, I've really ramped up work and life just feels so busy. Passion flower is really good for helping calm anxiety, agitation, and stress, but it's also really good for sleep. And I need that when I'm doing night shifts. So I try and take it in the car before I leave work, and then that way by the time I get home I feel like it's kicked in and it's going to help me have a really lovely restful sleep. And something I didn't know about passion flower is there's actually a few different varieties. So it's a different supplement I was using, and Elle was here and she said, oh yeah, that's the right passion flower. And I thought, oh, there's a different one? And she said, yeah. So not all passion flowers actually have this property. It's this particular variety, Passiflora incarnata, that she uses that has these calming, restful effects on the body. So if passion flower is something that you might need in your life, head over to www.australianmedicinalherbs.com.au. And while you're there, you can check out the other products she stocks. Let's get into today's episode. Welcome to the Practical Permaculture Podcast, your weekly dose of gardening, intentional living, and all things permaculture, served with a side of fun and plenty of great conversations. I'm your host, Alysse, and together we'll dig into practical tips, chat with experts, and explore ways to cultivate a more abundant, sustainable life. Let's get growing. Can you believe that we are nearly at the end of the season? We've only got this episode and one more, and then that's it. Our 8 episodes are done. We're going to wrap up the season with an episode about the house build that I'm doing, because I've had lots of questions about it, about the process, about what is eco or sustainable in the house, what isn't. So I'm going to delve into all of that in next episode. So if you have any questions, anything that you'd like to know about, send me an email, send me a DM, comment on this video or on Spotify or Apple or wherever, and I will get it. And I can then talk about it next episode, because a lot went into the build. When I was talking with Amy, we actually touched on it a fair bit, I think both on and off air. But yeah, so she's building as well, and that's what made me kind of think about it a bit more. We did extensive site sector analysis on the property, and that informed a lot of our decision making when it came to the house, but also money and council regulations and availability of things. There was lots that went into it, so I kind of want to unpack that a bit with everybody. I also had a revelation this week that it's not possums that are eating my pumpkins. I am now 90% sure that it's rabbits. So I came home from night shift last night, and there were these rabbits or hares, I don't know what's the difference, but they were sitting at the front gate, and I thought, oh my God, this is what has been eating my pumpkins. And then, believe it or not, I woke up this morning and another pumpkin had been munched on, and you can see these like 2 distinct teeth marks. So now I'm pretty sure that it's the rabbits. I feel like I've just been ping-ponging between the possums, the rats, and what else could it be? And yeah, I feel like it's rabbits. I know there's a lot of people that will relate to rabbits getting into their gardens. As soon as you get to those kind of bigger property sizes, they are everywhere. When I was a kid, we grew up on acreage and the rabbits were rife. So I'm not sure what I can do about that besides just continuing to physically protect my crops. I've also started all the winter seedlings. So I think I'm a bit late to the party But anyway, we're going to give it a whirl. I planted a whole heap of beans. I planted brassicas. I planted a couple flowers, and then I got a delivery from the seed collection, and got a whole heap of more seeds that I didn't have in my little goodie bag of seeds. So I got some leek. I got heaps of flowers. What else did I get? Brussels sprouts, just to bulk up what I didn't have. And I also got some garlic from a friend. She got it as a Christmas present for me. And I bought some more garlic, some different varieties from the seed collection, because their seed garlic is out at the moment. So that will be going in the ground after it stops raining, probably late March, early April. We'll just see how the weather goes. And I'm looking at cleaning up the beds a little bit. So the flowers have kind of died back, all the zinnias, the dahlias are kind of suffering. So I'm just thinking about what the next step is for those beds. Do a little bit of research about dahlias because I'm not sure. I've never grown them before. I intend to keep them in the ground because we don't get like frosts, and I think winters aren't super soggy wet. They're in raised beds. The drainage should be pretty good. I don't think they'll rot in the ground, but I just don't know what to do. Like if I just chop them and leave them, or whether there's a process. So that's some research, or if you have any tips, let me know. And then I think we'll get on to, just tidying some things up, like the figs or the pruning that has to happen, potting up some things once the weather cools down a little bit. So just looking at our list of things that need to start happening outside, prepping for autumn, getting ready for winter. There's still shitloads of weeding to do. We have so much grass that's running all through our garden beds. We've maybe done 20 meters of our hedge, so there's a lot more to do. The comfrey's going really well. It's getting bigger. It's not a barrier for the weeds and grass yet, but that's our aim with that. And I'm speaking with Michael from Gardening with Michael. He pointed out that I probably need to feed some of my plants a little bit more, and that gave me some pause of reflection to think about when the last time I added amendments to the garden. So I think I really am due to do a seaweed trip down to the beach, put some seaweed, some manure. I did some bananas in water, so I'm going to dilute that down and put it on the garden. My other mission this year is composting, so I'm still not doing great with that. A little side update. I need to figure out a system that really works for me and for our family. So I feel like the bokashi bins are going to be the thing that will work. It's just making a habit now of doing it and finding a place for it, because in the tiny home, the bokashi bin doesn't fit in any of our cupboards, and I don't want it on the deck because I feel like it's just in the way, and the dogs probably will start trying to chew on it, especially our puppy. So that's what I'm focusing on this week and trying to get established, done, achieved in my life. How are all of you going? I would love to know. Are you planting for winter? Are you prepping? Are you relaxing because it's just way too hot still? Let me know. Have you been noticing the change of season? Because I definitely have. I'm reaching for the covers in the morning a little bit more. I'm noticing the nights are getting a little bit cooler. I'm noticing insects and different things are starting to change and shift a little bit around. Just some little noticings that I wanted to share with you with the change of season coming up. And trying to pinpoint when that change is, and that in between kind of edge between the summer and the autumn. This week I'm chatting to Amy Sloan. As I already mentioned, she is so bubbly, so engaging, so interesting. She knows so much about preserving, and she's also self-taught on her preserving. So she's learnt good habits from the very beginning. I'd love to learn more from her. I'm really keen to get into the Vacola Fowler's method of preserving after chatting with her. It seems like the most simple and streamlined thing to do when it comes to preserving. I'm scared of poisoning someone with water bathing, and I'm scared of the pressure system because hot and steam and exploding is what comes to mind. So I'm going to hopefully invest in one of those soon once we get a kitchen that can kind of carry all the jars and equipment. and delve into that. I'd love to share that journey with you guys too as I start getting into it. I've been really slack on the homesteading front lately. I haven't been sourdough making. I haven't been pickling very much. I haven't been doing anything. I'm just in survival mode with the kids going back to school and working so much. So there's a season for everything, and it's just been put on the back burner for now, but I would love to get into it when I have a bit more capacity again. Well, let's get into it.
Hello.
Hey, Alysse, how you going?
Good. I've got Amy Sloan joining me today, all the way from WA.
Yes, hot, sunny Perth.
Yes. So you're actually in Perth itself?
Yeah, so I live in, I guess, what's called like the Perth Hills. So I'm about, say, 30 minutes from the CBD in like an east direction. So always a couple of extra degrees hotter where I am too. So it's been, very hot summer here.
And is that where you're building as well, or you're building somewhere else?
Correct, yeah. So where we're building is probably about a 7-minute drive from where we're living at the moment. So still in the Perth Hills. And on a half acre, which is incredible to be on that size property and only 25 minutes or so from the CBD. And it's been a long process. It's taken about 3 years to get to this point. But now that we're starting, things are happening really fast. And we're really, really excited to see all our plans come to fruition. It's been quite a journey.
Oh, so exciting.
Yes, very much so.
So let's rewind a little bit.
Sure.
How did you get into what you're doing now?
Well, I guess it started probably, it must be about 8 years ago now, and it was when we purchased our previous property, which was a 25-acre hobby farm, I guess, if you want to call it that.
Wow.
A little bit further out, so still here, like in the wider Perth area, but just on the cusp of what's called the wheat belt region. So about an hour from the city. So 25-acre property that we purchased, and that came with a 1,000 square metre orchard with around 35 or so like established fruit and nut trees, around sort of like that 15 years old. So really well established. And we spent 6 years on that property. And in that time, those fruit trees swelled the numbers from the 35, 40 to around 80 by the time we left.
Whoa.
And also installed around 50 square meters total of like raised vegetable gardening space as well. So I guess that's when it really started. I mean, when we moved out there, I would not have said I was even an outdoorsy person. Never grown a thing in my life. I think I bought a potted hydrangea once on a balcony in an inner city apartment, and that died in all about a week. So never grown anything, never had, I guess, any kind of interest or inkling towards, anything of that, realm. And I guess I found my hand forced once we moved out to this property, was all of a sudden becoming like a caretaker of this land and what was already there. And I guess wanting to make sure that we continue to nurture it. And being, I guess, so far out. So we were probably around 25-minute drive from our nearest corner store, which carried next to nothing. So to kind of go and get groceries of any type, it was pretty much a 40-minute drive in each direction. So that's where we began to, I guess, have an interest in, well, let's grow some food here because we've obviously got, we've got the fruit side of things. Let's grow like our annuals and our vegetables too. And we began putting those things into place. My father-in-law lived with us initially the first couple of years on that property, and he was always a keen gardener. So he sort of introduced me to getting my hands dirty and planting things, and it sort of started, I guess, from there. And then in 2018, my husband and I, we did a permaculture design course together.
Yeah.
So 2-week PDC. He had quite a keen interest, and he wanted to learn a lot more. And he sort of thought, well, let's do it together because we're a team and we're looking after this property together. And that really was, I guess, a turning point for me in just having a greater understanding of like working with nature rather than against it, and changing our approach, but also then being a lot more meticulous about paying attention to things like, the weather, the pests, the pollinators, everything, and just how it all worked together. And really sort of dialed up our food production. Then we sort of like doubled our growing space and put more trees in and put different trees in to have those varieties. And that first year of, I guess, record keeping, we brought in like 1/2 ton of produce to the kitchen. Kept a kitchen diary. I weighed everything. So
Wow.
that doesn't include like, you know, what I gave away or what fell to the ground or we gave to the chickens or, you know, maybe lost to other pests. That was just like what made it into the kitchen. So that's
Wow.
a lot of food. And then I guess from there, wanting to like, because finally we understood it's like, look how much energy both from us and nature goes into growing food. It's not easy. And I guess just it really leveled up the respect for you know, farmers and the supermarkets and just how much, you know, they're missing out because we realized what the investment was on us doing things on a small scale. So then because of that, respecting the food, really tasting the difference as well between homegrown and store-bought and things produced on a commercial level really made me want to make the most of that and harness that energy that had gone into it by then cooking it and cooking it well. So really leveling up my cooking skills, cooking from scratch, and then making the most of it and preserving the excess because we are a family of two. We only eat so much. My husband works away as well. So half the time it's just me at home.
Yeah.
You can only eat, you know, so many apricots or so many eggplants or whatever it might be. And I guess that's where it all kind of started.
Yeah, right. And you can see all your stuff behind you. Like
Yes.
you do all kinds of things. That's amazing.
I do. So some of this is actually still produce that we grew on that property. We left nearly 3 years ago now. Because obviously when you preserve food and you do so safely, it can actually last for quite a number of years on the shelf. And I had such an abundance and I'm taking my time.
And so why did you move out to 25 acres in the first place if you kind of
In
didn't
the
have
first
that?
place. Yeah, I guess for me, it was probably more driven by my husband at that stage. So we had actually been traveling full time overseas. So we'd sort of left Australia and we're traveling full time and we'd planned to kind of continue that and we're maybe looking to move overseas. But then my husband thought, no, do you know what? I can't because he was FIFO and he was sort of coming home to Australia working, joining me overseas and quite an intense pace. And then he'd come back and we'd sort of come back for a couple of weeks while he had his time off and we did a bit of a road trip and he sort of thought, do you know what? Now that I've been away from Australia for such an extended period of time, you realise how lucky we are to live in a country like we do. And we're starting to get the inclination to maybe put roots down here. We've sort of got that travel bug out of our system. And for him, he had grown up on a bit of like a hobby farm as a child. And there's some of his fondest memories that he had of like having the veggie patch and having the, you know, surrounded by other big properties and just having like vistas no matter which way you look. So he really wanted to come back to some land. And I guess I didn't have any preference either way. So went along with it. And I guess at that time, our main thing was parameters were like within an hour of Perth for still like, you know, working and airport commute. We wanted somewhere with good water because that's always a bit of an issue as soon as you kind of move out semi-rural.
Yeah.
And then we wanted somewhere that we could have, because like I said, my father-in-law lived with us. So we wanted kind of like a dual living type arrangement. So we spent some time looking for a property and then, we found one. We moved there December 2016 and spent nearly 6 years living there. And it was a really lovely chapter.
Yeah. And then what then made you move to where you are
away
now? Yeah.
So I guess when we moved there initially, very much, you know, starry-eyed. Oh, this is going to be wonderful.
We'll have goats and chickens.
Pretty much. So I guess first and foremost, and look, this wasn't something that came to us straight away. Obviously, we loved living there. But over the sort of subsequent years, 2 or 3 years in, a lot of things started to come to the fore of like, actually, we're not sure if we want to be here forever because I guess we moved out there with the thought that it was going to be the forever home. First and foremost was bushfire risk. So it was a real, we get every year to say November and we would be on like tent hooks from November to March every single year. Got really, really hot. We were surrounded by a lot of bush and we did a lot of work clearing our property to really make it as fire safe as possible, installing fire breaks. But that was like breaking work. We spent thousands of dollars hiring machinery to do that before investing in our own. So the fire risk was something that was always quite scary to us. We wanted to grow more and there was a time when we were exploring like a market garden concept, but we knew we just did not have the water to sustain it. And we had 7 water tanks and a bore and we still weren't like pulling enough water to be able to pursue that concept. And then I guess we began to feel a little bit isolated in a way. So whilst the area itself had probably around 350, 400 houses and residents, it was very much a aged population. And so we were in our like late 20s at the time, right? So we still very much got involved in that community the best we could. I ended up actually like working locally and volunteering locally, both of us. And we made some really lovely friends, but much older demographic. And we found that really hard to sort of, you know, make friends. And we still had our friends who all, I guess, like, lived in the city and who would come out for, you know, the weekend. And it was always lovely, but it just, we found our, you know, our ability to see people was few and far between. So there was a lack of that sort of social connection and community for us. And then just, I guess, the distance started to wear thin a little bit. So like I said, it was about, I say, 45, 50-minute commute one way to kind of come to our nearest hub to, say, do anything, you know, do some grocery shopping or hardware shopping, whatever it might be. And so we kind of found we would go like weeks on end without leaving the house because it was always such a drag to go anywhere and do anything. And say you'd have an errand to do, well, we'd say, well, if we're going into town, let's do all the errands all at once. And they become these big, long days, and it was starting to just wear thin. And then we had a lot of other interest too. My husband's a keen mountain biker, and there was nothing near us for him to be able to do that. He wanted to do that more. And it was, the distance is always, I guess, like a bit of a roadblock. So we kind of started again thinking maybe this isn't for us. And we spent a good 2-3 years actually working out what was next. And then we kind of came to realize that we're in the chapter of wanting to maintain those connections to our friends and our family, and they're all having children and growing up, and we want to stay connected. So we thought, no, let's stay in Perth, and that's going to be our next chapter. And that's when we began looking a little bit closer to the city. But we loved the aspects of, like, you know, the view, the space, the ability to grow, putting fruit trees in. So we had very strict parameters of, we wanted at least a half an acre, we wanted somewhere with views, and we wanted to be in the vicinity of the hills here in Perth, because that's it's close enough to the city, it's close enough to the airport, but far enough removed that you feel like you're kind of like out in the bush. So we just put the vibes out there, and we probably spent 2 years looking literally everything that came up for sale, because we were open to buying established and we were open to building, but because, you know, the hills are not an area that get, you know, subdivided and developed, right? What's here is here. This is not like Perth very, like, is known for its urban sprawl. So all along the coast, they just keep developing and developing and developing. So there is very limited ability to find, say, like a block of land up in the Perth Hills. And, I guess we just finally, like, we've been looking for about 2-3 years. Nothing had come up yet. So we weren't in a rush. We were happy to wait for the right thing to come along. And we popped actually on, like, one of your local Facebook pages, like property, like, buying, like, by private owner type thing. And we just put a post up and we said, this is us. We're looking for this kind of, you know, either property or land in these suburbs, if anyone knows anything. And someone saw it, realised that, like, I think it was her sister, worked with my husband, and she sort of saw the connection. She reached out to him with, like, a DM, said, oh, we've just subdivided and we've got a half acre if you're wanting to come take a look. We went the same day. It was yet to be titled. They're a couple months off, and we said, we'll take it.
Wow.
It was everything. It was everything. So then we had, like, I guess 3 months of going, like, okay, like, is it viable to build? Yes. Okay, like, let's do it.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it all came about, and why, we are where we are now.
Yeah. And so from 25 acres to half an acre, you're going to have to really plan where everything is, and you're still going to have your fruit trees and things like that.
100%. Yeah. So we spent quite a bit of time working out what we wanted to get out of this property. So it has been a bit of a long drawn out process, I think, mostly because what we sort of didn't realise until we committed and purchased it. So again, we are in a bushfire attack sort of zone. So when we got our BAL reports done, didn't get some great results, unfortunately. So we spent quite a bit of time actually going through, like, a number of assessors to actually come out and just do the work and actually survey the surrounding area properly, so we could get, like, a decent result, because the majority were coming back as saying, like, the entire property was FZ or flame zone. And it's like, well,
really?
It couldn't have been subdivided if that was the case. So finally we got some, like a decent response from an assessor who actually did their job properly, but we ended up with like a BAL 29 rating at best, which obviously
Wow.
is an added building expense, right? Adds around sort of 15 to 18% to your building costs. But then
Right.
that came with a very restricted like plot of land. So then they go, oh, you've got half an acre. That's so much space. We then had to be set back this much, set back this much.
Yes.
And all of a sudden we went from half an acre to this envelope. And then we had to go, well, like that's what we've got. That's what we're restricted by. It's also got like a battle axe entry. So the entrance in and out of the property is quite tricky, and you've got to be able to turn around with emergency vehicles as well. So
Yeah.
we kind of had to go, well, house has to be here. We knew we wanted other infrastructure like a shed and a water tank. We need to have an ATU system as well for our grey water because there's no septic. So by the time and that has to be in certain distances and certain setbacks and whatnot. So the time we've plotted all of that, and then it's kind of sloping property as well. So then by the time we've then done our earthworks and retained everything, all of a sudden we've gone from half an acre to like not a whole lot of. In saying that though, there is enough to do what we want to do, because what we had previously, that was on a scale that was fine for that time when I wasn't, I guess, as busy in life, whereas now we're in a different chapter and we're doing different things. So whilst we want to have an abundance, we also want to have an amount that's actually something we can manage.
Yeah.
So it's about taking our learnings and doing so on a smaller scale. So we definitely have enough space. We're planning for around 30 trees, hopefully. And I've got around just under 100 square meters where I can set up my sort of annual growing vegetable space.
Yeah.
And then we do need to have some lawn area, and we do have some other structures. But our plan is, once we are in any, I guess, bit of land that doesn't have either a structure on it or an embankment, we are going to grow something.
Yeah,
so
exciting.
whether that's something that's productive and food producing, we'll put in, fire retardant trees. We'll put in stuff for the pollinators. We'll put in, like herbs and some perennial crops as well, and then have like a dedicated annual space. So we want to really green it up as best as we can. It was quite fortunate in that the plot of land didn't have any trees on it, but we're surrounded by trees. So we've got the beautiful vista, but then we don't have to maintain anything, and we can then go and put in what we want to do. So I'm quite excited for the challenge.
Yes. So cool. And so do you have Italian heritage, Amy? Or
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so my mum's Italian. So I had Italian grandparents. They come from Rome in Italy. Yeah. And they immigrated here 1970, I believe it was. And my mum was born just after that.
Sorry, that must sound like a random question. Her Instagram handle is My Nonna Life, for anybody who doesn't. I was like, hang on, I don't think I mentioned that in the intro. So that would have been random for some people to listen to.
Maybe it's someone that wishes they were Italian, but they're not. No, I do have Italian heritage. So I guess the the Instagram handle is a nod to my own nonna, who was one of my favorite people. She's passed away now, but she's I spent a lot of time with my grandparents, particularly my nonna growing up as a child, and there's a lot of influence there and lessons that she, I guess, taught me that really resonate with me now. Maybe didn't appreciate it at the time, but they do now. And I guess it's a nod to I guess her and her the lessons she's taught me, but also the fact that I am self-confessed like little old nonna in a 34-year-old family. And I think everybody's got that sort of like that older, wiser woman in their life, whether it's a nonna or a yaya or an auntie or grandmother, whoever it might be. Yeah. There's that wise old woman who we know, who we love and respect, and who has so many valuable life lessons to impart that we just like aspire to be. And I guess it's me sharing, I guess everything that I associate with being a nonna, like feeding people, showing love by feeding people, growing things, doing things from scratch, preserving and slowing down. Yeah. And so that's, I guess, the inspiration behind what I share over on my socials.
So lovely. I've got Croatian heritage, and I think I'm the same. Growing up, it was very I don't know, like I was the only woggy person at my school, and we had no, like, it wasn't that long ago, but there wasn't a lot of Asian people at my school or Indian people or any other culture. And I was like the most cultural thing that our school had going for it. So, yeah, I think I kind of, when I was really young, like pushed it away a little bit to be like, separate myself from it. And it's definitely, like you said, as you get older, you appreciate it. And I think once I started getting a bit older, high school kind of thing, I embraced it a lot more. But I embraced it as being quirky and like a funny, weird part of me. But now I kind of really appreciate it. Yeah, and identify. And, you know, we've been over there a few times, and I'd love to take the kids over. That would be amazing to take our kids to see it. Especially while my grandparents are still alive, because, you know,
that's
they can
wonderful.
Share
and
that
then you
with
can
them.
share your stories and also get from them, you know, where did you live? Where did you shop? Where did you meet each other? All those little stories that you can then go and see and physically be there. I think that would be so great for you to then come back and then have those conversations with them. What a dream.
Yeah. Even as a teenager, we went back to my grandfather's village. I was in year 9. We went to the village that he grew up in, and they're like still churning their own butter from scratch. And they're so disconnected from the city. And, you know, and Europe's not a big place. You know, they're only, 15 minutes from the city. But still somehow they've retained all these traditional things that they do. Yeah. Yeah. It's really fascinating.
To be able to have the chance to go and see that and appreciate that and see that that's where they've come from, and still how much it's still relevant and holds stead today. I hope you get there again with your kids. That'd be really lovely.
It'd be amazing. We'd love to do like a year over there and just like live and like really immerse in that, because I think visiting somewhere is so different from living there.
100%. And that's something I went to Italy only for the first time in 2018, and we went to Rome, and I can't explain like the emotion I felt just like being there. It's like I felt I was home and I belonged, and just being surrounded by, Romans, which were my grandparents, and just hearing the conversations and the dialect and the mannerisms. I thought, oh my gosh, this is so cool to be here and to see this and experience it. And it was just an absolute joy. And we've been back again since, and it'll be where I think we go multiple times, but I've got my Italian passport now as well.
Cool.
So I made sure I went through the process to obtain that. And we would love to live there sometime too. So that's probably the next chapter. Maybe we might do a bit of like a half, spend the summer there and come back here. It's just, it's so nice to be able to connect to your cultural roots, like when you've got them, because it really just resonates inside you, and it does something to your psyche. I can't explain it, but you would get it having that cultural heritage. You just feel at home somewhere like that.
Well, my grandmother left when she was only 6. Well, one of my grandparents, she was only 6, and she went back when she was probably, like late 40s for the first time ever. And she really didn't want to go. She was like, no, I don't want to go back there. I have really bad memories of it as a child. Like it wasn't a happy childhood. And we convinced her. We all said, no, let's go on a big family holiday. Like it'll be so different and blah, blah, blah. And we went over, and she fell in love and ended up moving there the next year. It was like, I feel like it's home. I feel like, and she just had this massive like sense of like, this is where I belong. Belonging? Even after all those years and having no connections or ties or visiting it or anything.
How cool is that?
Yeah,
that's amazing. So
profound.
They're there now?
So she lives there like for 9 months of the year, and then comes back to Australia for a few months and just kind of goes back and forth. Yeah.
That's amazing. So then you can go, you can obviously spend time with her in her home over there. Oh, you got to get going.
So cool. So
very cool.
For anybody who isn't already preserving and doing all these kind of things, where do you suggest someone would start? Because there's so much information out there. There's so many different like methods. Even like you jump on a Facebook group and people are like, no, do it this way. No, do it that way. And then you've got traditional ways of doing it, which might not be the most, I don't know, hygienic. Is that the word? So like how do you do all that, and how do you start?
And I think you've hit the nail on the head, because that's where I think a lot of people, they've got an interest, but then they start the process of trying to learn and they become very quickly overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, I don't know. I don't understand. This person says this thing. This person says that thing. I'm going to poison everybody. I won't do it. which is not great, because obviously it is, once you do know what you're doing, it is very, very easy to do and it's very rewarding. So you're right in that there are, I think it's first about understanding the various methods of preserving food, because there's lots of methods out there that all render different types of results, and not everything is suitable for everybody. And so I guess it's about understanding what works for you and your circumstances, maybe your particular crops and your family and how you like to eat and consume your food, and then start with that. So, for example, a lot of people forget that freezing is a great way to actually preserve your yield. And there's little tips and tricks that you can implement to freeze things better so they last longer. So that is straight up a very easy thing for most people to do. Dehydrating or drying your food is another great, easy method that people can use. So it has a lot of great applications of fruit, vegetables, herbs, even meat. You can dry your food, and then that renders things shelf stable. Fermenting is another great method of preserving food. It has, I guess, a few less applications, but that's another great way to make the most of some crops. Then you've got, I guess, some approaches where if you want to make things shelf stable, because let's face it, fridge space is a premium. I'm forever playing Tetris with my fridge. So I want to keep as much out of there as I can. And that's where you need to look at some methods to render your food shelf stable, which is what I do. As you can see here, I've got everything on a shelf in my larder room. And that's where you've got a few different applications, like pressure canning is a way of preserving food specific to low acid food. So that's things like vegetables, stocks, broths, soups, even meat can be pressure canned. So that's an application or a method you can use if that's what you're looking to preserve. Then you've got water bathing, which is a method suitable for high acid foods. So that is things like your fruits, your sauces, your chutneys, your relishes, your jams, your marmalades, your jellies, etc. Water bathing or processing your foods that way renders them shelf stable. And then another method, which is actually the method I use for 90% of what I do, which some people know and some people don't, and that's called the Fowler's Vacola method. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Yeah, beautiful. So that is similar to water bathing, but different in a few ways. So water bathing means boiling our jars and processing them for a certain amount of time. Whereas when you use the Fowler's Vacola approach, it never gets to boiling. It's a much gentler approach. So it does yield better results, especially for things like bottling fruit. And it's an Australian approach and brand. So it's been around for over 100 years now. 1915 is when it was, brought to Australia as a concept by Joseph Vacola. So that process I find so easy, and it's so hands off. And if someone is a beginner and wanting to learn to process food, and they are making those types of preserves like the jams and the jellies and the chutneys, then adopting and learning more about the Fowler's Vacola method, I think, is a great place to start, because it's very, very safe, it's very hands off, and it's very easy to do, and takes a lot of the guesswork out of preserving, like with water bathing, because water bathing method is the same, but the time that you need to process is very, very different depending on whether you've raw packed, hot packed, the size of your jars, what's in your jars. So that process is very dependent, and it's a very active process, and it's a very hot process. You've often got hot jars and hot water, whereas the Vacola is very hands off. You can kind of just set and forget, and then come around, once your time is up, take your jars out of your unit and then set them aside to basically cool down and form that vacuum seal, which is what renders them shelf stable. And if you do it properly, your food can last years.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So that is, I guess, my, it's how I learned. It's how I got confident in my preserving skills, and it's what I advocate as like a really easy way to start. I have obviously dabbled in everything as well. So for me, because that is the bulk of what I do, that is the method I use to preserve my food and make things shelf stable.
Yeah.
But you're right, it can be tricky to start. So I guess the main thing is understanding the different methods, how they work in their application, and then go, well, what works for me? What works for me? So what method should I take? And then once you sort of know what you'd like to do, then you can delve into like the techniques of making different types of preserves, like your jams, like your bottled fruit, like your jellies, and it's understanding things like acidity and, hygiene and whatnot. So it's, there's a lot to take in, But at the same time, once you start, you become more and more confident with what you begin to do. And what I also tell people when they're learning to preserve, a lot of people feel like they've got to grow their own food to preserve. And whilst that's how I started, because yes, I was growing half a ton and bringing that into the kitchen when my hand was forced. So that's how I started to learn. At the same time, though, not everybody wants to garden or grow their own food or has the ability to have a garden. Maybe you're living in share homes or apartments, but you've got a really keen interest in reducing your food waste. You can purchase seasonal items from either your local markets or local growers or whatever it might be, even from the supermarket when it's in season and it's good quality and it's well priced. And you can do small batch processing. You don't have to go to this level. I'm a bit out there, but you don't need to preserve to this level. It could just start with making, a few things that you notice, like, you're buying, say, like let's say tomato ketchup, for example, like a really processed thing from the store, but you go through it a lot. Yeah. Can you maybe find a great recipe to make that from scratch, removing all those additives and preservatives, and then just make yourself a couple of bottles of sauce, and all of a sudden that's lasted, like the last you for the year. Yeah. And like the satisfaction in doing that is amazing. And so just start with small things and maybe start replacing or making from scratch those things that you really like, that you use all the time, that you're spending a lot of money on. Yeah. Like I taught a fermenting class last year, and that was like the feedback. They said, I love sauerkraut. My kids eat me out of sauerkraut, but for really good quality sauerkraut, you're paying $15, $16 a jar for like 500 mils, whatever it might be. And once they understood how easy it was to make it yourself and how affordable it was, you can spend, when cabbage is in season, a couple of dollars. It is so cheap.
So
cabbage,
cheap.
Salt. That is literally all you need. And the sauerkraut that you can make tastes better than anything that you'll buy in a jar on the shelf. And then you can just keep making it. And the money they were saving, that particular person sent me photos since of her making sauerkraut with the kids, every week. And she's saying, we love it. We eat so much more now because it's actually so affordable to do this when it's in season and it keeps for such a long time. Yeah. So that's where I say, start small and identify the things that you enjoy that you might like to make from scratch and pop on the shelf and stop buying from the supermarket.
That's so true.
That as a way to kind of start or dip your toes into preserving.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I know a lady and she has a big property but she just refuses to grow carrots. She's like, I'm really bad at it, and
Me too.
I'd rather grow other stuff that I enjoy growing and that my grandkids can come and pick and eat, like strawberry patches and stuff like that. They can, sprawl. And so that's what she does. She just goes to the farmer's market, buys the carrots in bulk, and then she'll use those and preserve them and cut them up and whatever. So I think it's a really good point, because a lot of people do go, well, I can't do that because I don't have property.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And look, a lot of people don't. How much of our population live in urban areas and either have next to no backyard or a small backyard, or, not an interest in growing and not the time to be able to grow. And that's all fine, but, they might really enjoy and respect food and want to learn this skill. So don't let that stop you from doing so. And look, I'm very much the same. I've gone from 25 acres and growing half a ton of food to I have 6 square meters of raised beds in this house. Yeah. And I'm only growing a fraction of what I used to grow. And I don't grow enough to feed us, so I'm supplementing from the markets as well. But then if I do happen to get a little bit of a bumper crop, couple of kilos, what I'll do is, obviously we eat it fresh, but then I go, I've got enough to preserve, and I'll make a small batch of something. Yeah. And what I find now is I'm paying a lot more attention to knowing what's in season, seeing it on special when I go shopping and buying, going, do you know what? I'm low on, whatever on the shelf. I might buy that so I can make some more and pop it on the shelf. And I definitely do a lot of small batch processing now. Yeah. And I preserve my abundance when I have it. Yeah. But if I don't have it, then I look at purchasing it and then preserving it that way instead.
What about things like quick pickles? I've learnt my preserving for my grandmother. And so zucchinis, for instance, they're in abundance in summer at the moment. And, we just stick a jar in the oven and pour it in and then seal it hot. Is that still appropriate to do? Is it safe?
Yeah. Sure. So I guess when it comes to sterilizing your jars, for example, so you use your oven, It can be done in the oven. However, it's not a recommended best practice only because it can reduce and impact like the quality of the glass over time. So what is probably better for like the longevity of your glassware and your jars is to either like hot, if you've got a dishwasher, run it through a dishwasher cycle, or pop it into a pot of boiling water for 10 minutes, and that will sterilize your jars for you instead, and then you can just leave them in there until you're ready to use them. Rather than doing it through the oven. And then with sterilizer, so making quick pickles, for example, which is typically like you're storing those in the fridge.
Yeah, some of them in the fridge, but some of them we chuck on the shelf. Like we just make them with the vinegar and leave them overnight, and then we just kind of seal them with the hot, because the jar's hot and the lid goes on. And I mean, we're eating it within a couple of months, so it's not sitting there for ages. But
sure. So that approach of like a hot pickle, we've got your hot brine, for example, your hot brine and your hot jar, and you're packing it all whilst it's hot. That's called hot packing or open kettle canning, is the two terms it's used.
Right.
So in that instance, when you're taking that approach, always really important to sterilize your jars, which is what you're doing, and that's great. It's recommended that they do go in the fridge as opposed to onto the shelf, because you can't always guarantee that it's got to boil. Whilst you might be keeping everything hot, you can't guarantee that it's stayed at boiling point and that oxygen is removed, because that's what can obviously cause deterioration inside. So look, for the most part, when hot packing, and especially when like you're doing it with your grandma, and it's that, and they've always done it that way. And this is where I have a lot of comments like, I was taught this way, and that is fine, but the best practice ideally is just then store those in the fridge, because by processing that jar, so say by water bathing that, or using the Fallon's Kohler method, what that then guarantees for you is then going to heat those contents to the right temperature so that they expand, they push out that oxygen pocket within the jar. And then as they begin to cool and form that vacuum seal, so no microorganisms can get in to cause any spoilage. And you've got that guarantee. You know it is 99% going to seal, and it's fine on the shelf. And in that instance, it can stay on the shelf for years. Whereas when you're hot packing, typically the shelf life is shorter, which, look, if you're going to eat it within a couple of months, that's fine. But if you are wanting to keep things, or for me, I go like, you know, there's seasons where, like, I know, for example, like you get one good crop one year and then not the next year, but because you sort of preserve the bulk, at least you've got it to last you.
Totally,
So that's why the best practice these days is to take that extra step of processing your jars if you want to pop them on your shelf. But look, I still hot pack, and I will do that if I'm making like a single jar of something. So you just got like a little yield, and I've made one little jar of something, and I'll sterilize a jar, and I'll work really hot, and I'll seal it. But then what I do once that jar cools down, I pop it in the fridge rather than the shelf, because then I'll typically like use it right away. So this is where I guess we've come a long way in understanding how things work, food science, and what maybe people used to do still can work, but at the same time we now know better. So this is why we do better. And I advocate for best practice, especially because now, like, I teach people in like a public space, so I need to make sure that I'm only advocating the safe way to do things. It's just like we're saying how, you know, once upon a time we didn't have to put seatbelts on in the car.
Yeah, totally.
We now know better. So it's the same with, I guess, advancement in like preserving food, is that we know it's a risk, maybe it's minimal, but we now know how to reduce that risk to next to nothing. So we advocate doing it that way. So that's the approach I try to take, while still being respectful of traditional recipes and traditional ways of doing things. And I do find, for the most part, like when I go and I do things, workshops or demos, it's always a particular demographic that will argue with. And I just make sure, because the last thing I want to do is obviously disrespect the way they've always done it, the way their grandma showed them, because obviously like it has worked for them. And if they're being really safe and really sterile, doing things really hot, it still can be safe. But then I also don't want to then, I guess, spread misinformation to that brand new person sitting in the front row who's maybe doing things, and I don't want to start them off with some bad habits. Do you know what I mean? So, so that's where I try to encourage like good habits from the get-go. and do things that way.
I told my grandma and she's like, that's not how we did it back in the village. I'm like, yeah, but your life expectancy was 10 years less as well back then. So there's a reason.
Look, and there's probably a lot of unrecorded things, like cases of like things going wrong and whatnot that we just don't have like recorded or know. But I just think now if we know how to do things better, we should. So that's where those like Facebook groups you're talking about, like rebel canning groups or people doing this. I came across a post the other day of someone that was water bathing their chicken for like 3 hours. I was like, oh my God, you're going to kill everybody. And this is how, and like the amount of people going like, what, like, look, you do you in your kitchen privately, but do not advocate unsafe practices. Like if you want to process meat for shelf storage, they must be pressure canned. Don't ifs or buts. So I guess when it comes to like sterilizing, like you asked me at the start, when you actually process your jams, pickles, chutneys, whatever it might be, when you process it by either water bath or the Fowler's Cola method, anything that's processed for 10 minutes or more, it will actually sterilize as part of that process.
Okay.
So if you are taking that extra step, you can cut the step of sterilizing. You still need to be clean and washed, obviously, and in good condition, no chips or cracks or anything like that, and your lids need to be in good condition. But you don't need to go to the act of, of sterilizing them first, because if you're going to process anything for more than 10 minutes, because it's heated to the correct temperatures, it's actually going to destroy anything that's in there as well that could cause spoilage for you. So it's sort of like it's an extra step, but it's also a time-saving step.
Well, the Vacola have their own book, don't they?
Yeah, they do. They have a book that comes with it on how to do it and how to do that safely. And once you understand, I guess, how the applications work, then you can apply that to other stuff that's not in the book. So once you understand the science behind it, it's all about pH, and as long as it's that pH, you're good to do whatever you like to do.
Yeah. We're living in a tiny home, so we don't have a lot of space with 4 humans in a very small space. But once we get this build done, we're going to have like a mud room / larder / whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to start investing in some stuff. So when I'm going down that backholer method, what kind of equipment do you need? Like, is it an expensive kind of setup, and how do you, what's the basics at least that I'll need to
definitely get yourself, I'm just thinking it's not in this room right now, I picked it up, I've got it out in the living room because I was using it just yesterday. So definitely get yourself a Vacola unit.
Okay.
So I've got one called the Simply Natural unit, which is their sort of base model. It is hands down so easy. Depending on the jar size, you can get a 7 or 8 in there at once.
Yep.
It takes only 60 minutes to process your items. You work with everything from room temperature. It's very safe. You can mix and match your different types of preserves and jar sizes. So if you're doing a few small batch things, you've got a few jams, you've got a jar of tomatoes, you've got some pickles, pop it all in, all at the same time, switch it on for 60 minutes. Bob's your uncle.
Wow.
So that unit itself, I think it's really affordable. It's $1.99 brand new from Vacola, who are established in Melbourne.
Yep.
And it comes with a couple of jars and the books and whatnot. But as well, have a look on like the Facebook Marketplace and local buy. There's a Fowler's Buy and Sell group that you can look at as well. A lot of people tend to, like, they've inherited one and they don't know what to do with it and they want to move it on. So have a look. There's nothing wrong with secondhand. You can also buy older units, so they just have slightly different rules. So I think like the older professional ones, slightly longer processing times, but they have bigger capacity, so you can do like up to 12 jars or whatnot.
Yeah, cool.
So you just need to make sure you follow the instructions for your unit in particular. And whilst you can use, so for example, like the Fowler's jars, I've got like 300 or so. I've picked up most of them. I know, but I have picked up most of those for free.
Yeah.
Like I think I've managed to get like 2 bundles of like 100 for like
amazing.
$0. And then I bought one big box of like, jars and lids and clips and a unit for like $150. So next to nothing. So the reason why I love these jars is because the majority of these are 60, 70, 80 years old.
Yeah.
They've been made and manufactured to last, and I love the idea that these would like tell a story of like what, who used to use this and what used to be in here, and you can use them over and over and over again. So I love them for that reason. And there's a couple components. You've got the rubber ring, the lid, and then the clip. So there's 4 parts to using these jars. However, you can absolutely use recycled jars in your
Okay.
Vicola as well. So
Yeah.
you are, buying things from store and you're saving up all your jars.
Yeah.
You can use them. So like I said, as long as they are in good condition, no chips or cracks,
And
they can be used.
just a normal
Twist
lid?
top is totally
Yeah.
fine.
Okay,
Yep.
good.
Yeah. So lids, what you want to make sure of is that it's still in good condition. So if it's warped in any way, it can compromise the seals. If it's starting to rust, say if it was on something that had like high acidity, you don't want to use that. But you can buy a lot of bulk lids online these days, and most tend to come in standard like 62, 72, 82 mil
Yes.
sizes. So you can just buy yourself an assortment of new lids and
Cool.
replace just the lids, but use your jars over and over. I still use a lot of recycled jars
Yep.
because I tend to make preserves that I might give away or gift to somebody.
Yes.
They don't get these jars. These
No.
are mine. They're very precious, but I will then make my like my small batch stuff in the recycled jar so I can give them away. So you can, like I said, same thing. So you can go online and maybe like pick up some bulk jars for a really affordable price, wash them, store them. The only things that you have to really buy new are the rings themselves.
Like the seals?
Yeah, I think I've got one just
How often do you have to replace those?
So they are technically a one-use item, one use only. However, like they're not expensive. I think it's 12. You can get buy packs of 12 for around $4.95, $5.95.
Okay.
However, I do use them more than once, provided that they haven't stretched or perished in any way. So if these have stretched, what you'll then find is that won't form a seal on your jar. So you'll process it and that lid will come straight off. And most of the time it's because you've used a ring twice. So I can normally get 2 goes out of them, but then once they begin to stretch a bit too much, I just use them in place of like rubber bands. I keep them and use them for other things.
Yeah.
And I will buy new rings, but then they're not really expensive. And I think if that's the only thing that you're buying over and over and it guarantees that good seal, then it's worth investing in. And then the clips and the lids can be used over and over again. So you kind of invest once and then you can use them over and over.
And did the clips have to stay on the whole time they're on the shelf, or can the clip come off?
So they come off. Have I got one? I think I've got one actually right here. So with my garlic. So that's a Vicola clip there. So this is just clipped onto the lid itself whilst it's in the processing unit, and it stays on whilst it's cooling down. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And then you remove this because that's how you test to see if your jar is sealed. So you should be able to pick your jar up by the lid and it's not going anywhere, and those clips then come off and go into storage. So you don't even need a lot of clips. You can, you can normally, think how many you'd be making at once. Normally like 20 to 30 clips is sufficient enough. But they do come in different sizes and spaces, and all the jars, like these ones, have numbers.
Yep.
And so they then need either like a size 3 or a size 4 ring lid clip. And so you just invest in the right goods for your jars. But most of the time, if you're buying that in bulk, people are then giving you the lids and the clips with them.
Yeah.
And that's why I've amassed quite a
goodness.
collection. So
I'm so
I think
excited.
I've got half of them in storage. So it's definitely something that, like, they do take up a bit of space, but I think they're great quality if you manage to get your hands on them. So once you've got your new kitchen and your preserving mudroom and you've got a bit of space to do stuff and you can store it, then I'm definitely looking to getting yourself some, because it's such an easy, hands-off way to safely preserve your food. And it's a great little community online that uses this method. And I've been advocating it a lot with everything I've been doing. And now I have people telling me they can't get their hands on anything because they think it's my fault, because everyone's out there buying stuff. And I'm sorry.
Yeah,
the
pressure canning scares me. Like, I don't, I don't even like using pressure cooker. Like, I don't know why, it just freaks me out. I just don't like the idea of it. And I've got little kids too. And when I was really into starting to kind of pickle and preserve a lot, it was hard having the kids around and knowing they're, climbing on chairs to like help me cook and do stuff. And there's hot stuff everywhere and the oven's on.
It can be quite dangerous, and you need to give it like time and attention. And that's why I tell people, like, if you want something, like, especially if you've got little kids at home or in your kitchen and little fingers and people climbing, that's why something that's very like set and forget, and also dealing with, for the most part, until it comes out like room temperature, it's much safer to do around younger people.
So last question, if there was somebody starting out on this journey of preserving, what's the one piece of advice that you'd give them?
I would say start simple, start small, start simple. making mistakes is fine as well. And I find like the best way to do that is observe your season, see what's in stock at the moment, what's in abundance. Go and buy 5 or 10 kilos of something and have a play. Like try a few different techniques, try a few different recipes, see what you like, use the correct methods to do so, and enjoy the process, because it is about learning. We don't always get things right. I've been doing this for a long time and I've made thousands of jars, and I'll still open something and go, oh, what's going here? It happens to all of us. So don't beat yourself up. And start small, start simple, start with some seasonal food as well, and ask for guidance as well. Because if you're not too sure what you're doing, I'm sure you probably know someone that that knows. Or like I said, try tested recipes and tested publications. Invest in the right equipment in which to do so. And don't get disappointed if things don't work out either. Like, don't let that stop you from going forward. And like I said as well, like, don't feel like you've got to grow your own food to preserve it too. Just buy, support your local markets, your local farmers, and buy locally and have fun with doing that. I think it's a skill that, like, we're all leading busy lives, and you sort of think, oh, why go to the effort of adding something else to my to-do list? But I think it's still really, really relevant with like the cost of living and how expensive things are getting, that the more, if we can, even just in small ways, make food from scratch or preserve our access and reduce that food waste, because it's such a big problem in this country and globally. If we can just do our little bit, it's not about all or nothing.
Yes,
but just
100%.
do a little often when we can to make the most of something, divert it from landfill and preserve it in some way, shape or form. You're doing your bit, which is great. And it's I think if all of us did something, is so much better than one or two people doing all of it. Taking
so
an all
true.
or nothing approach.
Yeah.
That's my mentality with things.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today and coming on to chat.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, and I'll put all your links to your socials. People can follow on your build and your garden and all the things. And yes, thank you.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Alysse, and all the best with your house build as well. I can't wait to see your journey. Exciting times.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks. See you later.